The reason that people who travel from majority overweight and obese countries to majority slim countries, for example, Scotland to France, USA to France, generally, if they are not actively trying to keep their old way of eating and they're just eating in whatever way is convenient and sort of the way everyone else is eating around them at that time, and where they are, like the way, if they don't adopt the way of the locals, and if they do adopt the way of the locals and just eat, without thinking about it, just eat the way everyone else is eating, they lose weight quite consistently, unless they're already slim. If they were eating like the normal way that normal Americans or Scottish people eat, they go to France, they lose weight without trying, and vice versa. When people from slim countries, Japan, Malaysia, majority slim, and Portugal, France, they travel, or Sweden, the Netherlands, they travel to a majority overweight country like the UK, anywhere in the UK. I just chose Scotland before, but like Scotland is the worst, but England's pretty bad too. You gain weight unless they consciously try to not eat the way we do. If they bring their habits with them of, I'm only going to go to a local bakery, not that all French people still do this. Unfortunately, in France, there is a rising obesity rate now, still not anywhere near like America or UK levels, and it's because they are eating more ultra-processed fake bread from supermarkets. They're not going as much to the local bakery, but it's still not as bad as here, where we don't do enough home cooking and baking, and even as much as they do. But they go to get their food baked, or they bake it themselves, not as often, maybe if they're elderly, but they might go to a bakery and they know they're looking for bread made with just 3 or 4 ingredients: water, salt, yeast, plain flour, maybe a few other culinary ingredients. So no ultra-processed ingredients, meaning Nova 4, the NOVA, Nova 4 definition, which is what scientists use when all the studies have been done around the world on ultra-processed food. The majority of them use the Nova 4 definition, which is industrially manufactured non-culinary additives. So things that you can't make in your kitchen, things that are only made in industry, invented in the 1900s and afterwards, completely new to our biology. Like, we never came across anything like this because it's invented in a chemistry lab, by a chemist. It's not in any way like anything we ate before. So all those additives, there are 10,000 of them allowed in the USA and only 400 in the EU. So yeah, we in the UK, we still don't have anywhere near the number of these terrible additives that cause you to want to overeat and feel more hungry. The reason we don't have as many, and yet we are still quite fat, is that we have a culture where we didn't want to keep cooking and baking. So we stopped cooking and baking. We ended up eating more of them than the French do. The French still don't eat as much of it. So they, in schools, a lot more of the food that they give people in schools, and in Italy as well, they give people food in schools and in prisons that is cooked on the premises still more. Like we used to in the UK, and we don't now. We a lot of the schools and prisons and hospitals order this disgusting slop, mass-produced stuff with all these Nova 4 additives. It's not food. It's cheap chemical replacements for whole food ingredients, and they use these non-culinary additives not as much as we do. In France and the UK, there's a difference in like how much people rely on it, and French people still do more home cooking, and their institutions provide people with more traditionally kitchen-made food that isn't mass-produced, bought full of chemicals, made in a laboratory. And so that's the reason why when you go to France, you don't have to try to lose weight. And the only way you can keep your same weight is if you intentionally try to keep eating the way you normally do. So if eating at supermarkets the same amount as before, but if you go to France and you go there and you just eat like your host family, say you're staying there for months with a host family, or like as an au pair, or an exchange student situation, then you might eat just what your family eats. You're gonna lose weight because you won't keep going back for seconds. You've got the option of seconds. That's part of the culture of France as well. You have the option for more, but you stop eating it more quickly. And this study that proves this to be 100% caused by the chemical additives and not by sugar, salt, fat, and protein and carb ratios and all that stuff that people want to blame and say, oh, it just they manufacture these things to taste really nice. The industry wants you to think that the reason you can't stop eating it is that they've made it taste so nice. They're like, oh, aren't we bad? Oh, we're so naughty, putting all this sugar and fat in there to make it taste so good. Aren't we naughty? Aren't we naughty? Don't you want to not eat this delicious food that we've made irresistibly tastier with the good bait? And it's like, that's all propaganda, actually, for the people who do look into this stuff. They want to distract you with that bullshit. Really, the evidence shows, this study by Kevon D. Hall in Cell Metabolism magazine, you know what I mean, academic journal, yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. He proved with his team in 2019, I'm going to link in the description below, he proved that it's not the sugar, fat, salt ratio. Because he did a study where he did, and he wasn't expecting to, he thought he was going to disprove this theory. He thought he was going down the hyperpalatability route of, oh, it's the sugar, salt, fat that makes people want to overeat on this stuff. And it's like, no, he was surprised to find that his study proved that people overate more, even though they said it didn't taste any better. And he kept the sugar, fat, salt, carb ratio, and even the fiber. He even added fiber to the ultra-processed stuff in order to keep it all like equal in every other way except for these added chemicals. So he had like sugar, salt, and fat were the same in the less processed, I will say traditionally processed. So like he made them meals. Every meal for 2 weeks was all ultra processed, and then another 2 weeks it was all less than ultra processed. So like traditionally kitchen made ingredients, no Nova 4 additives, no manufactured artificially in a lab additives, only like traditionally created, like farm or kitchen created ingredients were used. And the people in this study, in this inpatient residential place, they only ate what they were given, and they were allowed to eat as much as they wanted. And consistently people were gaining weight in those 2 weeks on the ultra processed food and losing it, even though he kept the calorie density, the macronutrient density, he kept all of that the same. And the only thing that was different was all the added bullshit chemicals in the ultra-processed food. It was just all the added chemicals. And that made people eat more, even though they ranked it tasting the same. So it's not taste. It proved it. When they want to tell you, oh, we have to add salt and sugar and fat to make it taste nice, that's why we do it. We're just so naughty that we keep making you addicted to this tasty food. No. A bunch of studies have proven it doesn't actually taste better, but you eat more of it anyway. But this study really directly compared it. He kept everything the same. The calorie density was the same. The fat density was the fat, sugar, protein, carb ratio was the same. Even the fiber was kept the same between the people in one group versus the other. And then they immediately swapped the groups around and gave them the other diet. And it just proved it. Kevon D. Hall, 2019, it proved it's not hyperpalatability. It's not the sugar, fat, and salt ratio. It is the artificial, invented in the 1900s type artificial, because like vinegar is artificial, but it's classed as Nova 2. If you look up the classification system, it's only Nova 2 level processing. You can find the definition of all the Nova classification systems that scientists use. And vinegar is Nova 2, and pure apples would be Nova 1, unprocessed, and you've got Nova 2 would be vinegar, yeast extracts, which yeast, I believe, is Nova 2. And Nova 3 is when you make a pizza at home with no added bullshit. So, and you don't put condiments full of bullshit in. You don't put condiments full of like diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and triglycerides or fatty acids. That chemical is in all the supermarket, not a lot of the supermarket bread in the UK right now still. And it's like, it's in so much stuff. That is like one of the worst things. It's so terrible for your gut bacteria. And yeah, when you ruin your gut bacteria, you don't know when to stop eating. So everyone, can we stop pretending that it's the salt, fat, and sugar making it taste better? It doesn't. Kevon D. Hall et al. 2019 proved, and he wasn't expecting to. He was expecting it to find no difference. He thought if he kept the calories and sugar the same and the fat the same, that people would eat the same amount and they wouldn't rank the taste any different. And they ranked the taste the same, but they ate more. They just kept going back for seconds more because they did not feel full, because their gut bacteria were ruined by these terrible Nova for additives, the non-culinary additives, your potassium sorbate, hydrogenated oils, interestified oils, all this crap that you can only get rid of by eating the way people in slim countries eat more, where they cook everything themselves, they bake for themselves. They don't necessarily go and buy some terrible ultra processed icing sugar in a tube, but they make their own icing sugar. They find out, oh, how do you make icing sugar? Or they've been taught by their grandparents, and they might make icing sugar the traditional way, made for hundreds of years. None of these bullshit chemicals added, just traditional kitchen additives and nothing else. Only things that you make yourself in a kitchen that are classed as culinary ingredients. And they don't put bulking agents in that are chemically industrially made in a chemistry lab. And that's why the French and the Japanese are slim, and that's why when you go to Japan or the French, if you eat the way they do, you will lose weight without trying. You won't be trying to eat less, but you will be eating less because you're not ravenously hungry all the time. Because if you're eating the way the average Japanese person, not the few that are overweight, if you eat like the ones who are overweight, you're eating like the ones who are consuming more ultra-processed garbage. You eat like the average Japanese person, you'll end up with the appetite of the average Japanese person. And you know it's not a genetic thing, because Japanese people living in France, Japanese people living in the US, and Japanese people living in Japan are not all the same average weights. A person of Japanese descent in the US is going to get a lot fatter on average than their Japanese counterparts in Japan. So it ain't genetic, is it? And why? And if it were genetic, it's not genetic, and it's not even the other things people want to blame it on, like mental illness. Mental illness exists in Japan. I mean, they've got the highest suicide rate in the world up there. It exists in Sweden. Sweden has a high suicide rate historically, and they weren't all fat, even when they had the highest suicide rate in the world, because they weren't eating ultra-processed food. So it's not like, yes, mental illness contributes to people using it as a coping mechanism, but you have to ruin the gut bacteria to a certain degree, or have a rare genetic condition, or a very rare medical condition that will make you overeat. Otherwise, you're going to use another coping mechanism. You're not going towards food. And it's proven by the different rate in different wealthy countries. The French can afford to overeat, but they don't. And the Japanese can afford to overeat, but they don't, in much smaller numbers. And the rate of how it goes up in different places at different times, it correlates perfectly with when people are not cooking as much and they're going and buying these ready-made sauces, ready-made mustard instead of making their own mustard, ready-made tomato ketchup instead of making their own tomato ketchup from fresh whole foods, ready-made mayonnaise. Oh, it's disgusting when you look at the ingredients on supermarket mayonnaise in a jar. It's disgusting. Make your own or don't eat that crap. Same with chocolate. Make it yourself or don't eat it. It's simple. Crisps. You can eat crisps. Make them yourself from whole ingredients or don't eat them. And it's anyway, I'm very passionate about this because for a whole bunch of reasons. I know people who've died because of eating a bunch of ultra processed crap. And not being warned that it was doing this to them, to their gut bacteria, and ruining every aspect of their health and making them want to overeat so much. It ruined my own health. I know, because when I replaced it with all home cooking, so many of my health problems just completely vanished. My eyes, I used to have horrific, sight-threatening autoimmune diseases in my eyes. I don't get flare-ups anymore. I can cake my face in makeup again. You want to know why I do that? Partly because I'm so happy that I finally get to wear makeup on my eyes again, because I don't get these terrible keratitis and uveitis flare-ups, which each of them alone have a 1 in 10 chance of blinding you. And I don't get flare-ups anymore, even when I cake my face in, good quality makeup. I do check it's hypoallergenic, but I couldn't even wear that in the past. Now I'm not eating any ultra-processed food. My inflammation is presumably so much lower. That is what happens when you don't eat all this crap. And all of my inflammatory conditions are so much better. My skin, my eye disease. I've got a whole history of immune-related conditions like eczema and asthma, and they're all so much better. And it's like, now I know what it was doing to me. I gained some weight when I started eating more of it, and then I lost it again, and that was amazing. And I lost more again because, again, for the first time, eating not crap that doesn't make me excessively hungry. But the weight is the least of it. I only have to talk about weight so much because that's kind of what gets people into the nutrition thing. Unfortunately, that's what people are obsessed with, and you have to get through all that all the weird, like all the personal and the political things that are mixed up in weight, you have to break through that barrier, because that is what's stopping a lot of people from looking into this, where they think, no, I mustn't look into nutrition because of some political bullshit or some personal bullshit. So you have to break through all that to get people to even be interested in the way that their food is being produced and mismarketed to them as food, when it's X food, it's ruined food, it's food that has been manipulated so much that it's basically just edible calorific substances, in the same way alcohol is. Alcohol is an edible calorific substance. No one calls it food. And yeah, that's why when you go to France, if you are an American and you eat the way the average American eats, you go to France and eat the way average French person eats, you lose it until you come back again. And there are so many stories like this on the internet, so many of people saying, I pick those particular countries, but I found numerous when I started like Googling for like in Quora and Reddit, like, and it's always the same pattern. If you move from a big fat country to a slim country, and keeping the wealth kind of the same. So I'm not talking about countries where people just can't afford enough food. Countries where everyone can afford to get fat if they want, but don't, for some mysterious reason, then it's always the same direction. No, I've not found a single person who says, I went to France from America and I accidentally gained weight when not watching what I was eating, when just eating whatever was everyone else was eating. I've not seen anyone say that. The only way that would even make sense would be if they were one of the very rare Americans who like lived in LA and like had like a super everything really controlled and didn't have any ultra processed food already, or had some other means of keeping their weight really low, and then they went to France, maybe. But for because it's like the great majority of Americans are not that person. So yeah, like I looked, I couldn't find a single case of someone moving from a slim country to a fat country and losing weight accidentally, or vice versa. It was a consistent pattern. So you've got to say we've got to rule out genetics. We've got to rule out I don't know, some kind of weird like in individual, like for some reason randomly all people in this country have this kind of personality and all the people in this country have a different personality. No, this personality trait of how hungry you are and how obsessively you want food all the time, that personality trait is very manipulated by your gut bacteria. That's the answer.